You ever have one of those moments where the universe serves someone exactly what they deserve? Well, buckle up, because this is the kind of story that starts with a snobby HOA Karen marching up your driveway with a clipboard and ends with her jaw on the floor when the sheriff salutes you. It was a Tuesday afternoon, dry and windy, with a low-hanging sun casting golden streaks over the hills of my 80-acre ranch just outside of town. I just finished checking the irrigation lines and had my boots up on the porch railing, sipping cold lemonade, when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of high heels stomping on gravel. That's when she showed up. Her name was Pamela, though. Everyone in the area called her Karen for good reason. Pearls, oversized sunglasses, a clipboard tighter than her bun, and that judgmental look like she just smelled expired caviar. She was the self-proclaimed president of the New Ridge HOA that had been formed when a cookie-cutter suburb popped up a few miles from my land. I didn't live in that subdivision. I wasn't under their jurisdiction. I'd owned this land since my grandfather passed it down, long before those prefab homes showed up. But that didn't stop her from treating my ranch like it was her personal project. She glared at the livestock fencing I was mending and barked, "You're violating Code 7.3b, unapproved fencing within HOA visible territory." I stared at her, blinking, trying to register whether this woman was joking. But she wasn't. She pointed to the hilltop trail some of her HOA residents like to hike, one that barely skimmed my northern boundary. "They can see this mess from the path. You're lowering property values." That was her angle. She wanted me to beautify the ranch so her people had a better view when they walked their overpriced doodles. I told her calmly, "This ain't your HOA, ma'am. This land's been ours since 1954. We're not under any community development or covenant." She smirked. "We'll see about that." Next day, I get a visit. Sheriff's cruiser rolls up. Deputy Moore gets out, young, nervous, sweating under his hat. He comes up, chewing his words like gravel. "We received a formal complaint that your property is causing public nuisance to nearby residents." I invited him onto the porch, handed him a lemonade, and asked if Pamela sent him. He nodded sheepishly and said, "She's been persistent. Something about your ranch being out of code compliance for her neighborhood." I asked if there was a violation. He shook his head. "Not really. It's outside our jurisdiction. But she's been filing noise complaints, code complaints, even environmental ones." I laughed. "Noise complaints? My cows moo too loud now." The deputy smiled but looked tense. "She said she'd escalate it if we didn't act." Now here's where it gets wild. 2 days later, I wake up to flashing red and blue lights bouncing off my barn walls. 5 sheriff vehicles on my land. 5 armed deputies standing at my gate, demanding entry. One even had his hand on his sidearm. And in the middle of them, there she was, Karen, arms crossed, smug as a cat in a birdcage factory. I walk out. Calm, hat on, clipboard in hand, because now I'm documenting them. I ask what the hell is going on. One of the senior officers, a guy named L.T. Kruger, steps forward. "We've received multiple official complaints about unpermitted structures and unauthorized livestock. We're under orders to inspect the property." I asked who signed the order. He said, "It was escalated through county legal channels. HOA board pushed it." I looked him in the eyes and said, "Kruger, you do know who I am, don't you?" He squinted at me. Dan? Something." I pulled out my ID badge from my wallet and held it up. You should have seen his face when he read it. Colonel Daniel McAllister, United States Army Corps of Engineers, retired, current consultant to the State Environmental Commission, and most importantly on contract with the sheriff's own department for rural property assessment and disaster response. His eyebrows shot up so fast I thought they'd fly off. "Colonel," he said, instantly standing straighter. The other officers looked at each other, unsure what to do. I walked past them, straight up to Karen. who looked confused now. You tried to weaponize your little HOA against a decorated veteran and state contractor, I said, and now you're trespassing. She sneered. You don't scare me, I know people. I smiled. Good, so do I. Just then, a black SUV pulled up. My lawyer. And not just any lawyer, State Representative Maria Lopez's personal legal advisor, who also happened to be my cousin. She got out, handed Karen a cease and desist letter, and turned to the deputies. If you continue with this inspection without a valid warrant, we'll have to file federal charges for unlawful search and seizure under Title 42. And since Colonel McAllister is contracted by the sheriff's office, this would also fall under internal conflict of interest. Kruger looked like he wanted to melt into the ground. Karen? She went pale, completely drained. Her whole face sagged like a deflated balloon. I turned back to her. You want to play Queen of the Hill, Karen? You better make sure the hill doesn't belong to someone who outranks your whole kingdom. And with that, I told them all to leave my property. As they were walking back to their cruisers, Kruger paused and saluted me. Apologies, sir. We didn't realize, I nodded. No hard feelings. Just keep your folks off my land unless they have a real reason. Karen didn't say a word. Just stood there, stunned. But trust me, she wasn't done yet, because what she did next, well, let's just say it would take things to a whole new level. And this time, it would backfire harder than she ever imagined. You'd think after getting legally and publicly embarrassed in front of half the sheriff's department, Karen would have crawled back into her HOA meeting room and stuck to regulating mailbox colors. But no, not this woman. She doubled down. Exactly. 1 week after the standoff at my ranch, I received a thick envelope in the mail, certified, hand-delivered by a guy who looked like he regretted taking the job. Inside, a formal lawsuit. Karen, through her HOA, was suing me for damages to community value, mental distress caused to residents, and repeated violations of visual conformity standards. Let me repeat that. Visual conformity standards. She claimed my barn, which had stood since the 1960s, was an eyesore visible from hiking trails, and created an atmosphere of rural chaos that violated community aesthetic expectations. She even included photos of my ranch, taken with a drone. Yup, this woman illegally flew a drone over my private property to get pictures for her lawsuit. That's when I knew it wasn't about fences or cows or barns. Karen hated that I existed. Outside her control, she was trying to bully me into submission, hoping the legal fees alone would wear me down. But what she didn't realize is that I wasn't just some old cowboy with a porch swing and a pickup. I'd spent 28 years navigating bureaucratic red tape in the Army Corps of Engineers. I practically wrote the book on land code, environmental policy, and legal loopholes. And I wasn't about to let her win. First thing I did? I hired a private investigator, not for her yet. For the HOA. I wanted to know who was funding her nonsense. Turns out, Karen wasn't using HOA dues. She was using her own money because the board refused to approve the lawsuit. She'd hijacked their name, sent out fake board memos, and filed the paperwork solo. That's fraud. Strike one. Then I had my attorney draft a countersuit. We filed harassment charges, a formal complaint for drone trespass under FAA regulations, and a cease and desist for slander. That last one? Because Karen had been going door to door in her neighborhood claiming I was an ex-military extremist who kept illegal weapons in my barn. So now we're both headed to court. And here's where fate finally decided to have some fun with her. The court date arrives. Small rural courtroom packed with local reporters, HOA members, a few off-duty sheriffs, and half the town. Karen walks in dressed like she's auditioning for a daytime legal drama, navy blue power suit, clipboard in hand, lips pursed tighter than ever. I walked in wearing my uniform, not to intimidate, but to remind everyone who I was. The judge, An older man with glasses and a deep southern drawl looked over the initial filings and raised an eyebrow. "Miss Pamela, are you telling this court you're suing Colonel McAllister for running a ranch on land he legally owns?" Karen interrupted. "It's about the impact his property has on our community." The judge leaned forward. "You mean the community he doesn't live in? The one built 30 years after his grandfather deeded him that land?" You could almost hear the oxygen leave her lungs. She tried to argue visual nuisance, devalued trail views, emotional stress from rural smells, and even played a recording of cows mooing to prove the auditory disruption. The judge actually chuckled. "Miss Pamela, you do realize this is farmland, not a meditation retreat?" Then it was our turn. My lawyer presented documentation proving I'd been targeted, harassed, lied about, and spied on by unauthorized drone surveillance. The judge looked horrified when we played a video Karen's drone captured, one that showed it flying close, enough to my workshop window that you could see blueprints on my table. That's when the real fireworks began, because right in the middle of the hearing, a man stood up in the back of the courtroom. Turns out, he was with the FAA there to deliver a federal citation to Karen for violating airspace regulations. Her face went from smug to shattered in a heartbeat. And it didn't stop there. A second man stood up, this time from the county district office. Apparently, Karen's lawsuit triggered a routine audit of HOA operations. And guess what? They found over $28,000 in unapproved expenditures from her tenure as president. Money spent on aesthetic community upgrades, like a wine fountain for her backyard, and security consultations that turned out to be her brother-in-law's company. Fraud, embezzlement, federal drone violations. And then the sheriff's department filed their own complaint, because when she called in that 5-car raid on my property, she used fabricated documents to make it look like they had legal cause. That's 3 agencies now involved. And me? I just sat there, calm, quiet, letting karma do its thing. The judge dismissed her entire case with prejudice, meaning she couldn't file again. He approved our countersuit, awarded damages, and authorized a temporary restraining order. She couldn't even walk on the public trail near my land for 6 months, but that wasn't the end. Because local news picked up the story. Headline read, "HOA President Loses Lawsuit Against Decorated Veteran Faces Multiple Investigations." The segment aired statewide. By the following week, Karen had resigned from the HOA. Her neighbors turned on her. Some started petitions to dissolve the HOA entirely. Others just egged her house. I got letters from people thanking me for standing up to her. One couple even brought over a pie. And me? I went back to mending fences, because I wasn't looking for a fight. I just wanted peace. But if someone comes for my land, my livelihood, or my legacy, they'd better be ready for the storm that follows. So next time someone underestimates the quiet rancher at the end of the road, remember Karen. And remember what happens when you mess with a man who outranks the sheriff.